What if everything you believed about history's most famous photographs was carefully constructed propaganda? AI algorithms are now analyzing decades of historical images, revealing sophisticated manipulation techniques that fooled generations. These aren't obvious edits. They're subtle psychological tricks embedded in composition, lighting, and subject positioning that shaped public opinion without anyone realizing it. Machine learning models trained on millions of images can now detect patterns invisible to human eyes. They identify micro-expressions that were staged, backgrounds that were artificially enhanced, and crowds that were strategically positioned. The AI doesn't just spot obvious Photoshop. It recognizes the psychological warfare embedded in seemingly authentic moments captured throughout the 20th century. Soviet photography was particularly sophisticated in its deception. AI analysis reveals how Stalin's photographers didn't just remove people from images, they carefully choreographed scenes to project power. Lighting was adjusted to create halos around leaders. Crowds were positioned to suggest overwhelming support, and even facial expressions were coached to convey specific emotions that served the state's narrative. The famous image of Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill at Yalta appears natural, but AI detects subtle staging that influenced how the world perceived power dynamics. The positioning wasn't accidental. Stalin's placement creates visual dominance, while lighting subtly diminishes the Western leaders. These microscopic details shaped international relations perceptions for decades, all hidden in plain sight until now. American wartime photography employed equally sophisticated propaganda techniques. AI algorithms reveal how photographers manipulated perspective to make military equipment appear more imposing, positioned soldiers to suggest invincibility, and used depth of field to direct emotional focus. The goal wasn't documentation. It was manufacturing consent for war through visual psychology that bypassed conscious reasoning. The iconic Iwo Jima flag-raising image, analyzed by AI, reveals subtle but deliberate staging elements that weren't previously recognized. While the moment was real, the photographer's positioning, timing, and angle were calculated to maximize patriotic impact. AI detects compositional elements that trigger specific emotional responses, transforming a military action into powerful national mythology through visual manipulation. Corporate propaganda in historical advertising photography is now being exposed by AI pattern recognition. Algorithms identify how companies manipulated images to associate their products with success, happiness, and social status. The techniques were so subtle that consumers never consciously noticed the psychological triggers embedded in seemingly innocent commercial photography that shaped decades of buying behavior. AI analysis of civil rights-era photography reveals how news outlets used framing and context to influence public opinion about protesters. The same event could appear threatening or peaceful depending on subtle photographic choices that viewers never consciously processed. These discoveries are rewriting our understanding of how visual media shaped one of America's most critical social movements. The technology behind this analysis uses deep learning networks trained on propaganda techniques from multiple cultures and time periods. These AI systems can identify facial microexpressions that indicate coaching, detect unnatural body language suggesting staged scenarios, and recognize lighting patterns consistent with deliberate emotional manipulation rather than natural documentation of events. Cold War-era photographs from both sides reveal remarkably similar manipulation techniques, suggesting these methods were developed independently but converged on the same psychological principles. AI algorithms detect how both American and Soviet photographers used identical compositional tricks to make their leaders appear more charismatic, their military stronger, and their citizens happier than reality suggested. Sports photography propaganda is particularly sophisticated, as AI reveals how images were crafted to promote national superiority during international competitions. Olympic photographs weren't just capturing athletic achievement. They were constructing narratives about cultural dominance through carefully orchestrated visual elements that made certain nations appear more powerful, organized, and successful than others. AI detection of propaganda in fashion and lifestyle photography reveals how images were used to promote specific social values and behaviors. The algorithms identify subtle cues that encouraged conformity to particular beauty standards, social roles, and consumer behaviors. These photographs weren't documenting culture. They were actively shaping it through sophisticated visual psychology that operated below conscious awareness. Religious and cultural event photography often contained propaganda elements designed to promote specific ideologies. AI analysis reveals how photographers manipulated lighting to create divine associations, positioned crowds to suggest universal support, and captured expressions that reinforced particular spiritual or cultural narratives. These techniques were so sophisticated that they influenced global perceptions of different religious movements. The AI systems can even detect when historical photographs were taken at specific times of day to achieve particular emotional effects. Golden hour lighting wasn't chosen for aesthetic reasons. It was selected because warm light triggers psychological responses that make subjects appear more trustworthy and likable. This revelation changes how we interpret countless historical images. Celebrity photography from the mid-20th century reveals sophisticated propaganda techniques designed to create social role models. AI algorithms detect how stars were photographed to embody specific values, lifestyle choices, and political perspectives. These images weren't entertainment. They were social engineering tools that influenced millions of people's aspirations, behaviors, and beliefs about success and happiness. AI analysis of newsroom photography reveals how editorial choices in image selection and presentation created false narratives about global events. The algorithms detect patterns in which images were chosen to represent complex situations, how cropping influenced interpretation, and how caption context was used to reinforce specific political perspectives rather than providing objective documentation. The most disturbing discovery is how children's educational photography contained propaganda elements designed to shape young minds. AI detects subtle techniques in school textbook images that promoted specific cultural values, political systems, and social hierarchies. These photographs weren't teaching facts. They were indoctrinating entire generations through visual manipulation that bypassed critical thinking development. AI algorithms can now identify photographs where subjects were coached to display specific emotions that served propaganda purposes. The technology detects micro-expressions that indicate when smiles are genuine versus performed, when grief is authentic versus staged, and when enthusiasm is real versus manufactured. This capability is revolutionizing our understanding of emotional manipulation in historical documentation. Scientific and medical photography also contained propaganda elements, as AI reveals how images were manipulated to promote specific health policies or scientific theories. The algorithms detect staging in medical procedures, posed laboratory scenes, and artificially enhanced results that made certain treatments or research appear more successful than they actually were at the time. Architecture and urban planning photography was heavily propagandized to promote specific political ideologies about how societies should be organized. AI analysis reveals how photographers made certain building styles appear more impressive, neighborhoods seem more prosperous, and urban development look more successful than reality. These images shaped public opinion about urban planning for generations. The AI systems are uncovering how photography was used to create false historical narratives about technological progress. Images of factories, transportation systems, and industrial development were carefully staged to suggest greater advancement than actually existed. These photographs influenced international perceptions of national capabilities and contributed to Cold War tensions through visual misinformation. Environmental photography from the past contains propaganda elements that influenced public opinion about conservation and development policies. AI algorithms detect how natural landscapes were enhanced to appear more pristine or more damaged than they actually were, depending on the political message being promoted. These images shaped environmental policy debates for decades. The technology is revealing how international diplomacy photography was choreographed to suggest relationships and power dynamics that didn't actually exist. AI detects subtle positioning, timing, and contextual elements that created false impressions about international cooperation or conflict. These discoveries are changing how historians interpret major diplomatic events of the 20th century. AI analysis of historical disaster and crisis photography reveals how images were manipulated to either minimize or exaggerate the severity of events depending on political needs. The algorithms detect staging and rescue operations, artificially enhanced damage assessments, and emotional manipulation designed to influence public support for specific policy responses to emergencies. The most sophisticated propaganda was embedded in seemingly mundane everyday life photography. AI detects how images of families, neighborhoods, and social activities were carefully crafted to promote specific lifestyle ideals and social structures. These photographs weren't documenting life. They were prescribing how people should live, think, and organize their societies. This AI revolution in historical analysis is forcing us to question everything we thought we knew about the past. The algorithms are revealing that virtually no historical photograph from the 20th century was purely documentary. Almost all contained elements of propaganda, social engineering, or political manipulation. Our understanding of history itself is being rewritten by machines that can see what humans missed. The implications extend far beyond academic history. As AI exposes these techniques, we're developing better defenses against modern visual manipulation. Understanding how propaganda worked in the past helps us recognize similar techniques in contemporary media, social networks, and political communications. The lessons from historical analysis are teaching us to be more critical consumers of visual information today.